Come with us as the Buffalo Maritime Center explores the construction and tour of the Seneca Chief. The following is a presentation from the Greece Historical Society. The second Tuesdays of the month programs from the Greece Historical Society are sponsored by members of the Greece Historical Society and by the sponsors of advertisements in the newsletter. Space for the second Tuesdays of the month programs is provided by the Greece Public Library. The Seneca Chief Boat Project, presented by the Buffalo Maritime Center, recorded August 12, 2025.
Stowers, I like to say the current president of the Greece Historical Society, or president for life. I'm not sure which.
Current president.
Someday. I want to thank the library for hosting us. So first of all, I'd like to have a few words from Claire, one of the librarians.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you tonight and tell you about a few things that will be coming up to the library this month. We've got, tomorrow night we have Forgotten Waters, which is with Jeffrey Ziner. He does the Gloucester blog, and we're going to talk about buried waterways of Rochester. We're going to have a Friends book sale this month. I know a lot of you like that, on August 23rd, the Saturday from 9 to 3 at Buckman's Plaza. And then on Wednesday, August 27th at 6:30, we have a music performance by Ivy's Home, which is a 4-piece Americana string band with guitars and a fiddle, my favorite. And a special announcement, we still have some of these beautiful Erie Canal calendars at the main information desk. So one per person while supplies last after the program. If you want one, visit us at the main information desk. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. I want to introduce Maureen Whalen, who's just got a few announcements about our upcoming programs.
Yes, we always have to have the commercials before the program. So I want to tell you about our upcoming program, particularly, which is going to be Saturday, the 16th, at Erie Canal Park. We will be in the tow park shelter and also up on the canal. It will be from 10 to 2. We'll have docents up on the towpath that will tell you about the canal and also about South Greece role during the heyday of henpeck. We're going to have a packet boat up there, and also you can have your picture taken with Molly the mule. Not a real one, but life size. So that's some of the things. We'll have activities for children. So just a fun way to familiarize yourself with the history of the canal in general, and then specifically about the role it played in the town of Greece. The next Tuesday night program is going to be Tuesday, September 9th at the Greece Transportation Center, and that is called From New York to Niagara, 10 Days on the Erie Canal in 1840. And I will be doing that program. Once the canal was completed, the hottest tourist trend of the day was to take a trip from New York City to Niagara Falls. And I have read 12 first-hand accounts of what it was like. And so I've taken all the good parts from each and weaved them together to give you an idea of what it was like to travel on a packet boat in the still relatively early days of the Erie Canal. So I hope you will join us for that night. The one last thing I want to mention is our passport to South Greece. I know I've handed out a lot to people tonight. They're free. If you didn't get one and would like one, we have them up here. Gina's right up here, and she can give you one. It's all about the sites that are still around on Elm Grove Avenue and Ridgeway that are connected to the Erie Canal. So we hope that you will take this passport, do an informal driving tour of it. If you complete all the sites, bring your passport back to the museum, and your name will be put in for a drawing for a free membership to the society for 1 year. Okay, so I hope you'll all come out and join us on Saturday, and then in September also. Thank you.
Our speaker tonight is not the speaker we had on our brochure. A quick change. John Montague, he earned his PhD at the University of Wisconsin in 1974, and 10 years later moved to Buffalo to set up the SUNY College at Buffalo Design History program, where he is now Professor Emeritus. With two colleagues in the design department, he founded the BSc Center for Watercraft Studies. At the time of his retirement in 2006, he helped to form the current Buffalo Maritime Center, which focuses on the collection, research, preservation, restoration, and replication of historic watercraft. Using boat building as a vehicle, the center engages the community outreach programs and STEM training for young people. He has worked as a designer, film animator, illustrator, boat builder. He has been active in architectural preservation and urban planning, and heavily involved in Buffalo's waterfront revitalization. He's an active volunteer, sailor, maritime painter, and member of the Buffalo Maritime Center Board of Trustees, and their current director, Emeritus. So please welcome John.
All right, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Rochester, of course, is one of the key cities along the Erie Canal. Was not created by the Erie Canal, but certainly was enlarged by its presence in the Erie Canal. What I want to do tonight is to, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the general picture of the Erie Canal, but I do want to do a little bit of a background and discuss something of the significance of it, because a lot of people know that it's there, but they don't really realize in terms of American history how important the Erie Canal was, how it reshaped America, and how it sort of set, in some sense, the destiny of America moving into the interior for better or for worse. But let me start by saying the main reason I'm here tonight at this time in 2025 is because of the project that we started well over 20 years ago, actually almost 25 years ago, the idea of building a canal boat, and then coming up with the build the canal boat that DeWitt Clinton made the trip of the Wedding of the Waters in 1825 to open the Erie Canal to New York. And just to spoiler, we are going to be taking that trip in the boat that we just built. We're going to be going to, starting on September 24th, I'm going to go through some of this, stopping at 29 cities, working our way down to New York City, and finally having a big ceremony in New York City on the lower west side, Pier 26, I think it is, which will be a big kind of we're calling it the gathering of the waters. I'll give you some detail on that. But what I want to do is to go back and look at, well, this is the boat, the design that we ultimately came up with. But I want to go through some little bit of background of how we got here. And if I got all of these things working, yes. So the Buffalo Maritime Center, which I was one of the co-founders, started as a humble program within the design department of Buffalo State with the two other colleagues who were both interested in boats, a furniture maker, a furniture designer, and the other one who happened to be head of the department, which allowed us lots of flexibility. And my sort of reason for coming to Buffalo was setting up the History of Design program, which was, in a way, well, it allowed, the concept was that virtually everything we look at is design. Somebody's design, someone's made design decisions, aesthetic and practical and functional and so forth, cultural about things. So there should be a large field. This is part of developing a new concept of how academic disciplines are laid out. And that art history, for example, which I have my PhD in, was kind of under that umbrella of that much larger context. The beauty of that was that all of a sudden I realized I could do naval architecture because I like it. I could do almost anything because I like it, because it's designed, it fits into this. So we started this program using boat design as a way of getting at general design problems, form and function and culture and everything that peels off of that. So that's how I sort of twisted my career into that area. I floated into a new era. So what we did, we started building boats, and we started building boats with students and using the boat building as a method of teaching these various design concepts. And we eventually got more and more complex boats. We started building more advanced boats. We actually went to school. We went back to the wooden boat school, and we worked at Mystic Seaport and so forth. We made contacts with all of those people who were doing historic boats and doing historic boat restorations. These are some of the boats we did. This is also gathered together here. We designed some of these boats. This is a boat I designed for Delaware Park. We put boats back on the water where they had been in the 19th century and so forth, as well as back here is a 1901 boat from the Pan American Exhibition, electric boat, which we built from scratch. The one behind it, the big sailboat, is a Lake Erie shallop. They were designed originally in 1885, a big fishing boat in our end of Lake Erie. We built one of those. The whole idea was to build boats that were relative to the space that we were living in. And we did a lot of exploration. This is where we made our apology to the academic world by saying we're studying the history of this local area. We are doing serious research, and we did do serious research on these boats, sometimes building boats that hadn't been around for 100 years. So we also almost immediately when we got going on this, this suddenly had a very popular appeal with the public school system, and one of the I think vice superintendent of school came to us and said, we're trying to get these kids on campus. Is there a way you could maybe do some boat building thing with them and bring them on campus and get them acclimated to the idea of being on campus, dealing with professors and so forth, and maybe thinking about going on to school later and so on. And the first school they started with the Native American magnet school, which was not far from the campus. So they gave us some money to build like 3 boats, and said, okay, we'll do gooders, we'll do this, And it just blew our minds because it was so powerful with these kids. The minute they realized that they were building a real boat, it wasn't just a project, it wasn't just a practice, it wasn't a model, it was a real boat that you could get in. It was transformational. And they became addicted to it. And we realized when you find an addiction, you need to run with it, at least if you're a teacher and you see this happening in your students. And so that really kind of spurred us on to start doing boat building programs, particularly with inner city kids, particularly with kids that were disadvantaged in the sense that they did not have access to the water. Buffalo, like a lot of other major industrial cities, all of the majority of people had the waterfront homes and the waterfront beaches, and they had all of that. The buses didn't run that way; they ran north and south instead. So there were a lot of kids that didn't even know basically we're on Lake Erie. So this became a great educational mission of ours to do this, and this has grown over the years. Over 30 years or so, we've been doing these kinds of programs. We even now have sort of our version of the food truck. We have a trailer that does all the boat parts in it and all the pieces in it, and we go to various neighborhoods and so forth and do this boat building program. Those boats, they start in those programs, and the boats get more and more sophisticated. This is a group of students from the local school for the deaf. We've been working with them for like five or 6 years now. It's an integral part of their program, that was created some challenges, but I know you have a big sort of deaf population programs at RIT and so forth, and we were surprised when we started doing this how many people can sign. It was like, you didn't realize this is kind of a sub-language that's out there. Anyway, so that was another thing we did. We also, the historic boats that we did kind of got us into this habit of exploring designs and why those designs were done in this particular area. The Lake Erie shallop, for example, which is this boat in the near side here, was an 1880 fishing boat, 1885 fishing boat that till about 1910, 1920 or so, before power boats kind of took it over and so forth. We built one of those, and it was built for this area. It was built for the eastern end of Lake Erie, and we developed that. This is another boat similar to that. The other boat on the outside is that one for the Pan American exhibition and so forth. So this became a passion of ours, and what happened when we got those boats started, that brought in an adult group. And those adults came in. We affectionately called them the geezers at that time. Now that was 30 years ago. I have now become an official geezer. I'm turned 81 this summer. So you know, I'm like, it's a yeah. It's an honorary term. Anyway, but these people, oftentimes they were retired people. Obviously, they had the time and they had the interest, and they'd always want to do something like this and so forth. They became kind of an integral part of the program, and they started working with the kids in the classes and with the college students in the class. So suddenly, I had all these student assistant or adult geezer assistants that were working. Some people stayed with us like 10 years. I mean, they were working with us for 10 years on these kinds of projects. Now, the Erie Canal was one of those waterways that we were interested in, and obviously as we were looking at the kind of boats that were built in our area in western New York and so on, it was kind of in the background for quite a long time, and I had been, as a historian, I had been interested in this for some time, casually and so forth, and it sort of occurred to us that this was really an important waterway in terms of boat. We were thinking in terms of boats. I was early member of the Canal Society and so forth, and I was sort of disturbed that their interest in the Canal Society were all about the locks, the depth of this and this bridge and this culvert and so forth and so on. But what about the boats that were on the canal? So no one seemed to mention that. It's kind of like you're going to do a history of the interstate highway system, but you don't mention cars and trucks. And so that was kind of what our piece was. And so we became very interested in that. Now let me just say a couple of things about, and I know you're probably living in Rochester and so forth, you're aware of the Erie Canal and some of the significance of it, but let me just put these things out of the way. We can discuss some of this later. But the importance of the Erie Canal has been greatly underestimated. In fact, a lot of people that we've dealt with in the whole process of building this boat and so forth, they keep saying, is the Erie Canal still there? Can you still go down the Erie Canal? Is it still, did they fill it all in, No, it's there in its modern permutation. It is there. It still works. I mean, people still go on the Erie Canal. It still connects the Atlantic with the Great Lakes. The critical thing about this in terms of American history was that had it been built 20 years later, or even 15 years later, there were a number of developments, industrial developments and technological developments that conspired together that basically eliminated the need for the Erie Canal. One was the steamboat, which was not at that time, and when the canal opened in 1825, was not really powerful enough or useful enough to go up the Mississippi, right? So all the trade of the Midwest went down the Mississippi and out New Orleans, and people had to walk home. They had log rafts and so forth. They couldn't really make it back up. 15 years later, they could, okay? On the other hand, also the railroad was just beginning. At almost the same time that the Erie Canal was done. In fact, the first, you may know the famous first commercial steam engine, steam locomotive, was the DeWitt Clinton, which connected Albany to Schenectady, so that people going on packet boats could save all that time of climbing up the locks out of the Hudson. They could do a 45-minute ride. They could get over to Schenectady. So the seeds of the new technology were already there when the canal was built. But what was most important about it was that from a social and political point of view, was that the immigration patterns were set up for passing into the Midwest. It was actually the ability to get off the East Coast that Euro-American culture was able to penetrate into the interior. For better or for worse, the Native Americans, this was a horrible thing. For the Euro-Americans, this was a great triumph, man against nature, conquering the interior and so forth, manifest destiny. All of those ideas emerged out of that. And the only place you could really get through was the Mohawk Valley. That was the one crack in the Appalachian mountain train all the way down, into Alabama and into Georgia. And so, once you could get in there, then you could get over to Buffalo. It opened up by water entrance into the interior of the country, all the way to 1,000 miles to the Minnesota, to Duluth. Okay, and you could also get by water into the basin of the Mississippi. So all of a sudden, just this one little skinny connector of water opened up that whole interior. What the result of that was that New Englanders who happened to be abolitionists, Puritans and Presbyterians and Methodists and so forth, they came into this area. Also, the Germans, the sort of progressive Germans who were escaping from Prussia and so forth, came into this area. The Scandinavians and so forth. So the people who came in on the Erie Canal were anti-slavery. So within, by the time the Civil War takes place, the northern part of the United States was pretty much fixed as being abolitionist. Okay, so that meant that the South, the wealth that might have gone down to New Orleans and so forth, and the Southerners who were the slave owners were trying to get up into Illinois and Indiana and so forth, were actually squelched by the industrial power of the North. And there was a huge difference. And you ask yourself, what would happen if the steamboat had changed the trade so that it went out of New Orleans? This is one of these historical what-ifs thing. What if that had been New Orleans had been the city that all of that development went to? It would have been a very different outcome of the Civil War. The other thing was, and again, this is something that many people are aware of, but oftentimes forget. New York City was made the premier financial capital of the world because of the Erie Canal. All that stuff coming in, all of that trade coming in went through New York City, and from New York City went to the rest of the world, and vice versa. Everything coming into the United States came in through New York. And you think about New York City before the Erie Canal went through, where could you go? You go up the Hudson River, you got these huge mountains on both sides and cliffs and so forth, like there's nowhere to go. You go up and look at Albany and then go back home again. But once it opens up the end, it now becomes the entrance, literally the entrance into the continent. So New York City becomes, for the first time, larger than Philadelphia, than Boston, than the other coastal cities that were important in America. So the point is, it was extremely important. It was extremely important in terms of the ideas that were carried into the northern ideas, not only abolitionists, but it created as one historian says, it created a waterfront with all the sins and evils that waterfronts create. It created a waterfront all the way through the middle of the state, which meant you had drunkenness, prostitution, unemployment. I mean, everything that happens on any world waterfront happened right across through the middle of New York State. And because of all the sin that was going on there, you had all the reformers coming in. You had the Shakers and the Quakers and the Presbyterians and the Spiritualists and the invention of the Mormons. And I mean, this was one great, what's sometimes called the burnt over district, because there were so many preachers, trying to save the people that were being going astray in this long waterfront. So it was a very dynamic place, and much of American culture was shaped by what went on that canal. Okay, enough about that. You know where it goes from Albany to Buffalo, but also to New York City up the Hudson. Another point about this, just a quick point, is that idea of which becomes kind of common in the Industrial Revolution. You get kind of different kinds of technologies working with one another, kind of an intermodal technology. When the boats would get to, when the canal boats being pulled by mules and horses would get to Albany, they would hook up to a side-wheeler steamer that would take them down to New York City and vice versa. Okay, so we had steamboats and sailboats on both ends of the canal. They were hauled by mules in the middle of the canal, for various reasons we can talk about. It was the practical way to do it, and also we've done a lot of studies on how many calories does it take for a canal boat, a canal horse to pull 1 ton and so forth. Anyway, it was a very economical way to do it. You can't go over 4 miles per hour anyway, so why not use a horse instead of a propeller and side wheeler and so on. Anyway, so all of that kind of stuff was happening. So it was a very exciting and complex time. This is what Buffalo Harbor looked like in 1825. I mean, the city had been burned to the ground in 1813 in the middle of the end of the War of 1812, and this was the harbor was actually artificially created by damming up the river and blowing out the sandbar, and so there was a big argument between the town of Black Rock and the town of the little village of Buffalo and so forth as to where the Erie Canal would end. They won that contest, and they made the canal run all the way to Buffalo instead of stopping on the Niagara River. Anyway, this is what it looked like, and that's the Erie Canal coming up. This is Lake Erie. There's where the sandbar was blown out. They could come up here and get on this canal, and this canal would take them by water all the way down to New York City. So we re-watered the canal in its original place in 2003, 4, 5. In that period, it had been buried. This is what it looks like today, or looks like the other day. That was the actual Erie. That was the Erie Canal, and that was the opening of the Erie Canal. It actually is the physical opening of the Erie Canal, coming from the east up here, down here, making a right-hand turn, and going out into the Buffalo River. And I often point out to people that St. Louis built this gigantic arch. Syrian Arch, a beautiful thing, yes, great architecture and all of that kind of thing. They tore down thousands of houses in the historic district, and so to make this arch the gateway to the west. Actually, that's the gateway to the west.
Yes,
it is, so we don't take any of that stuff from Missouri. But that was where it came out, and we have a little sign there saying Erie Canal. Come on, that was the inspiration. Was that this was a critical piece to what Buffalo was all about. In fact, the Erie Canal was really the origin story of Buffalo. Incidentally, these are two bateaus, War of 1812 boats that we built. Those are some other boats that we built over there in the electric boat. So the minute this opened up, we kind of clomped on it. We put our stuff in there to keep the plastic tubs out of there. This is supposed to be a historic place, so we're doing historic boats. Then around the end of the last century, that sounds so pompous, but anyway, the end of the last century, I came up with this idea. Buffalo has an identity crisis. Most of these post-industrial cities like our own, and Rochester and Syracuse, have these who are we? Why are we? All of that kind of thing. We've got the Bills, we've got the Sabres, we got thinking, talking proud. They got all the kind of, nobody knows what Buffalo is supposed to be now. And it sort of occurred to me, we need that origin myth. And I just looked at my own garbage can, and I saw this symbol on it, which is the seal of Buffalo. And you look down in the bottom there, is a canal boat. That's the thing that we don't have. Here's another clearer version of it. We have sailboats, those are still there. The lighthouse is still there. The canal coming in here with two, whatever those things are, they look like a couple of dogs anyway, right? That's a canal boat. So that was the missing part. So really what we needed, what we could do is we could create that symbol by doing a replica of that boat, if we could figure out how to do it. One of the other things in the later versions of this, they added sparks around the edge of it because of Niagara Falls and the electricity and so forth. But that was basically what was sort of my inspiration, and what we ended up doing was building this boat over. It was a long and tortuous period, but really a lot of fun, and it was kind of the miracle of getting this done is still staggering to me, and I'm not sure how it actually happened, but we built this boat with volunteers, 220 volunteers over a 4-year period with only 2 paid staff, 2 paid boat builders that are members of our staff. Everyone else was a volunteer. That was the miracle, that we could get people to work free for 4 to 5 years consistently to do this without killing each other or killing us or killing themselves or fighting or whatever. And that was part of the general plan. The whole concept in doing this boat was that We wanted it to be a public project. We wanted it to be a community project. This was about the community. I've been involved in historic preservation for years, and we've been involved with developing the harbor for a long time. I mean, this is a part of the city planning. I mean, we have, Buffalo, I should mention, Erie County has something like 85 miles of waterfront, of fresh water. You know, now what country in the world wouldn't want that? You know, and we basically turned our backs on it. And it's like, you know, people would stand there, with their back to the water and look at Cheektowaga, or they look at the rusty, you know, building over here or whatever. It's like, turn around, you know, and look at what you got here. So I was from out of town, so a number of us had a kind of a fresh view on all of this. So like, for God's sakes, you know, we really need to recapture the waterfront. I wasn't the only person doing this, but this became kind of a passion of the Maritime Center to recapture the waterfront, to rebuild the harbor, to re-find the center, the core of where Buffalo started, and use that to build its redevelopment around. So the idea to build a canal boat. Well, the problem was, in doing this, we built a lot of boats by this time. We had built hundreds of boats. In fact, if you count kayaks and canoes, we probably built 1,000 boats with you know, from sea kayaks to rowboats to sailboats to so forth. Not all of them historic boats, some of them new boats and new technology boats and so forth. But we knew how to do boats. We were pretty well trained by this time. We've been doing this for like 10 years or so. And we knew how to deal with volunteers and so on. So we set upon this project to build a canal boat. One of the problems in building a canal boat from this period, 1825, was this is before photography. So you didn't have any photographic evidence of the boats. Most boats disappear in ways that houses don't. I mean, houses often will leave a basement or something like that, you know, when they burn down or fall down or whatever. This is what archaeologists play with all the time. But when a boat is built, it slides off into the water. Maybe the workman leaves a hammer or something on the beach or whatever, but other than that, it's gone. And unless you find it underwater somewhere, it rots away or it disappears or it sinks or whatever. So getting the evidence about these boats was not easy. The other thing is that boats, most people don't realize this, before the end of the 19th century, most architecture, domestic architecture, as well as almost all boat building, naval architecture, was done by rule of thumb procedures. It was built without plans. And it seems amazing, but it's true. I mean, even large ships were built with how long do you want it? You know, how wide do you want it? How much draft do you want in it? You'd pace it off. You put stakes in the ground. You knew, and then when you knew what the capacity of it was, you'd have a half model. You make a half model of it. You'd get the lines off that model. What the different frames would have to be to get it. You'd build the hull. Then you knew how to rig it. If it's this long, a draft has that much. You knew what kind of rigs to use, and so these were all, I won't say intuitive. They were rule of thumb procedures that people who knew how to build boats knew how to do. Just like carpenters, you know, in the Victorian period and so forth. Many of these houses don't have plans because they weren't required, for one thing, and the carpenters didn't need them. You know, how wide do you want the dining room? You know, that's big. Can we have a little more there? Okay, yeah, you're never a foot on it. You know, we want a door over there. I know how to build the door. You want another door here? Bay window over here. You want it here? You know, what do you want the door? You didn't have to have plans for it. You could just do it. And that's how it was. You look at a lot of houses in Rochester and Buffalo and so forth, they said, these houses look similar, but they're not quite the same because they were kind of working on the general square footage, charging by square foot and so forth, and the carpenter knew how to do it, how to put the porch on, how to take the porch off, you know, and so on. Same was true with boat building. So there were no plans. At the bottom line was there no plans. We had to have plans for the boat because we were putting a huge amount of money into this. We had to find the materials. We had to be able to calculate the materials. This was the modern problem. We needed to crunch numbers in order to get this, to raise funds for it, and so forth and so on. So we had to come up with that. So that wasn't an easy thing to do. This was largely kind of fell to me to kind of figure what were these boats like? There were no photographs of these. There were just a lot of drawings, a lot of pictures, a lot of bad drawings, and in my work in historic preservation, I got to be pretty good about redrawing bad drawings You know, looking at what does the person actually know when he's looking at this. It's like looking at a child. Well, the child's drawing is, well, the thing has 2 eyes, and we know it's got a mouth, you know, and we know it's got arms, and these things on the end, those are probably fingers, and we know those are probably actually 5 fingers, even though they've got 3. You know, so you can kind of like figure out what that person was actually looking at. So even a drawing like this, which is relatively sophisticated, has to be interpreted. And one of the things I found with architectural restoration was that if there's something that's counted, that can be counted, it's probably correct. Like this boat probably did have 1 large door and 2 windows on either side. That's probably true. But oftentimes what you'd find is that it would have that, and yet it would have a man who's standing next to it who was like 4 times bigger than the door. You know, well, you know, the man and the door are probably about the same size. To either make the boat bigger or the house bigger, or you make the man smaller. So you could work through some of those things, and actually there's, what I'm trying to say basically, there was information even in the worst drawings. So we had to look at everything, and we did. On the other hand, there were examples of other boats from that period, from that time, in other places that they might well have known about. The Trekkschuten, which were the drawn ships, pulled boats, canal boats in the Netherlands and so forth, look very much like the boats that started showing up on the Erie Canal. It's not that they went off and copied these boats, but they knew about them, and they had seen pictures of them, and the kind of practical problems that those boats were solving were very similar to the kind of problems that they had to solve. Even in the interiors of the boats. Not like this one. I mean, this looks very much like the interior of our boat. It's a little bit smaller because it was on smaller canals. These are this is an 18th century interior of a Dutch boat, and this is a 19th century interior. I like the guy with the laptop, you know. I mean, you think about it, the only problem is no place to plug it in. You know, you think, the genius, you know, he's way ahead of his time. Anyway, but you know, how people sit, how they feel. I mean, there was a lot of information about this. This is one from actually a detail of a painting, which was a very sophisticated painting, but done later than the actual period. But I had to look at a lot of people who had drawn pictures of these boats, but they drew it. They had living memory of when these boats were there. So when they drew a historic image of it, this was what the boats looked like when I was a kid. Right? This was done in I think the 1870s, when the kind of packer boats like this were gone. But he remembered it, and there were a number of other artists who you know are sticklers for historical detail. That even though the painting was done after the packer boats were gone from the canal, they knew what they looked like. I mean, there was that kind of information, like someone who had living memory of these things. But sometimes the memory gets crazy. When I was doing a restoration or a replication of a Buffalo Harbor ferry boat, which was a small little hand ferry, there was a 101-year-old woman in our church, and I thought, oh boy, she was there when this happened. And I didn't know, what color were the boats? And she said, well, and I'm thinking, I'm going to find out. What did they paint? Green, red, what, you know, were they colorful? What, you know? She says, I don't think they were a color. Now, what does that mean? You know, it's like either they were really dirty or scummy, or she's colorblind. Anyway, this is where sometimes these lines of evidence run short. So we looked at all kinds of things. Ultimately, from gathering all this together, I won't show all the details, but I went through hundreds and hundreds of pictures and came up with basic types, like what are the types of cabins, what are the types of hulls. Excuse me. Some are double enders pointed on both ends, some are square in the end. They have slightly different shapes and so forth, but there were kind of a limited number of types. And from those, we decided we drew our plans. And we had to draw plans. We had to do measured plans, which probably nobody in 1825 did. They just started building the boat. They put the frames far enough apart so they were strong enough or shaped the right way and so forth. They just did all this by hand. We had to have we had to have measurable plans, which we did. The key thing in building any boat is to get the hull shape right, get the roundy bottoms and the bow and stern right in the right proportions and so on. And to do that, you have to develop what are called lines plans, which you see up above here. And you could do this with a half model, or you could measure the half model or whatever. But if you take these two drawings, there's a top to the top side looking down, and then there's a side view looking. When you put those two together, from those you can develop what a slice would be, like a slice of toast, you know, a slice of bread. You know, you got the loaf and you chop it up like this. Once you have those sections, that will give you the frames that you then can bend. You can bend the wood around to give you the shape of the boat. That's a very necessary thing to do to do it correctly. So I admit we used lasers when we laid this out. We had what we like to call the biggest table in Western New York. I mean, it was 63 feet long. It should have been 73 feet long, but we didn't know the boat was actually 10 feet longer than the boat we were starting to build. So we did that. We laid that out, and from that we were able to get the sections of the boat. And this is kind of roughly just an illustration I did of how that works. So you end up getting these patterns here, the bow to the middle of the boat on the right-hand side, the middle of the boat to the back of the boat on the left-hand side. And you take those forms, you make a pattern of that, make a pattern here. We did it like with the plywood and slats and so forth, and then cut the lumber to fit that, and then set that up on the backbone of the boat, or on the keel of the boat. And then once you get into these, are just sort of cutaway simple. It didn't actually work exactly this way, but you lay those out, and then you can bend battens around, and that'll give you the fair curves. And you have to do a lot of correcting, because any mistake you make, if the curve goes into wobbles like this, it's supposed to be, you know, so you have to fill in, and you have to cut, and you have to adjust everything. And then once you get that all done, then you have to plank it, and planking it is its own kind of problem. So anyway, I'll get back to that and how we did it. The other problem we had to do is, like, where are we going to build this? We wanted this to be in the public, by the public, for the public. You know, it was a public project, and it was a public education project. And we got all kinds of flack from all kinds of people, and everybody. I mean, this is not typical of just this kind of problem. I mean, everybody has to deal with it. I said, no, we can't do it. They can't afford it. No, you'd be in the way. People said, no, you don't want to build it down on the waterfront. Who's going to want to watch a boat being built? You know, like, wow, you know, what a dumb idea. You know, we had to go through all of that kind of stuff, and a lot of those people were government officials who didn't kind of get the concept, and someone would say, you know, you're going to destroy the view, and I would say, no, we will be the view. You know, anyway, so that took an awful lot of politicking, an awful lot of article writing, an awful lot of work in the territory and so forth, and we decided where that boat ought to be built. If this is going to be a public boat, if this is going to be in the public eye, it's going to be a new symbol. It's going to become a symbol of Buffalo. It needs to be built in Buffalo. It needs to be built right on in the most important site, and that important site was where the Erie Canal comes into that point I showed you in the other picture. The Erie Canal up in the upper left there. Commercial slip comes into the lake, or comes into the river. That's where we wanted to build it. I shot this off the sign that was down at the harbor then. You can still see the raindrops on the sign. Anyway, so that's where we wanted to build the boat. And of course they were saying, why don't you build it out in the country somewhere and bring it in when you're done, you know, when to launch it and so forth. And so we took a lot to do this. Anyway, long story short, with the help of the newspaper support and generally building up kind of public support for this, particularly the Buffalo News, we were able to secure that site. And over on the right are some of the sketches I had done about what kind of building we needed to have. You know, we needed to be at least 100 by 50 feet, you know, for the boat to fit inside of it, and so on. Anyway, those are some of the versions of that. Well, anyway, a long story short. We got a donation from a guy walked into our shop and said, you know, you're building the Erie Canal boat, you know, kind of interested in how that's doing. And I said, well, I gave him the full tour of the shop. We shop up in Black Rock. We're building a lot of other boats and so forth. And I thought, well, there's another $65 member, like, so I showed him through. So we sat down up in the library and he said, well, how are you paying for the boat? Everybody asks us that question. I said, well, we're doing the regular thing. I gave him the whole pitch on what grants we were trying to get and fundraising projects and so forth. And he says, I'll pay for the boat. It's like, oh my God, and so we sort of pulled ourselves off the ground, jaw off the table, like, thanks, and the beauty of it was he said, and this is when because a lot of people, come in, you guys ought to do this, you guys, how come you guys never do this? How can this was just a straight up thing, and he says, it's like it's Friday. He says, do you have a bank here? And I said, yeah, an M&T bank. Or he says, well, I won't be able to get the check in there, but I can get it in by Wednesday. I said, oh, that's great. I mean, usually people are like, oh, this is going to be a long, protracted thing. Where one day I'll give you some money or whatever. This was like immediate, and he was he's a saint. He's still with us. He even joined our board later on. But that really kicked things off, and once that happened, this is how these things work, and I know if any of you were involved in any kind of public not-for-profits and so forth, even churches and so forth, you know how they work. When somebody steps up and does something like that, it's like, all right, this is a go. They bought this Apple stock. That sounded pretty crazy to me, but so-and-so bought a million shares. Oh, I guess I will. And so this kind of created a wonderful kind of fundraising storm that really got us rolling. And then the state stepped in that had been kind of reluctant to do any of this, and their whole idea was that they didn't want to build a building down there and have a white elephant. Someone builds this building, they had this idea, and the thing fizzled out, and then who cares? And you're stuck with the building. And we were trying to say any building that's built on that site is going to be extremely valuable. This is probably the most precious spot, most historic spot in Western New York. It's where the Erie Canal ended, and we got nothing there except a little metal sign. So any building built there is going to have all of that historic panache going for it. But anyway, once we got money for the boat, the response was, we've always thought that was a good idea. And you're robbed of being able to say, I told you so. You just might say, yeah, we think so too, and then go on. So what happened was that the state put in about $5 million to build the building. We wish they'd given us, they built $1 million building, given us the $4 million to do the rest of the program. But anyway, so the building got built, and the building was beautifully built. This is under construction. This all happened during COVID. And hence we're wearing masks there, and I used to make this sort of ha-ha joke because DeWitt Clinton was the first governor, and the first one to take the boat to New York. He said, well, we want to have, when we do the boat, we want to take it down to New York City, and we want the governor, whoever she is, and it was whoever she is, Cuomo was the governor at the time, whoever she is, to be on the boat. And then within a few months, she was the governor. So I don't know where the punchline for that joke was, but anyway, and so she came. She was still lieutenant governor here when she cut the ribbon for the boat being built, and the scissors are bigger now, of course. But that was we were all mashed up, and all the politicians were there, all lined up, and we started building the boat. Now the boat, we had claimed, we knew how to build the boat. We knew if we got the plans done and so we could get the materials, we know how to build the boat. This wasn't a problem. We had the two master carpenters, master boat builders we had with us, had grand experience in working on boats and big ships and so forth. They knew a lot more about this than I did. I was a historian, kind of writing stuff. I built smaller boats and sailboats and so forth, but this was a massive thing. And one of the huge issues about this was getting the lumber, getting the kind of wood that needed to be got. to build a boat like this. These boats would have been built with white pine, which is fairly scarce now, but that's the boat building material because the closed cells, it doesn't rot. So what they definitely would have used to be able to step out in your backyard and cut one down. Now we had to go down to northern Pennsylvania. We had to travel all over to find this. We got wood from you know, the Amish are out there. They got these trees. They know where the trees are and so forth. And there are these little sawmills out in the hills. They know, they spot a couple of trees. They cut the trees down for us, and we would get the slabs. We'd have it all rough cut, and it would be delivered to us, or we would go pick it up. It still had the bark on it, and so all of that wood we had to trim down, cut down, and basically mill down to the sizes that we need. There was nothing in the boat that could be bought at Home Depot. I mean, this was everything was custom made. It wasn't like, no such thing as a 2x4, a fake 2x4 that kind they sell. But it was actually needed to be 2 inches by 4 full inches, or 6 by 8, or whatever. Anyway, so that's how we did it. And of course, oak doesn't grow 67 feet long, which our basic keel was. So it had to be put together. So you learn how to make trees longer than they are. This is a typical ship lat here, and that's how you make the wood longer. And then of course all of the parts needed to be put together. And you know, we've done a lot of fairly big boats. I mean, boats up to 20, 30 feet. Like this boat was 73 feet long. It weighs about 40 tons, and all the parts and pieces of it are extremely heavy. We did actually weigh this. This is the stem, the bow of the boat was 780 pounds. So you can't just like pick it up and it's like you're making a canoe. You're going to walk around and pick up the pieces and stick it together. And so this took some thinking and planning and so forth how to do it. Lay it down on its side, build it on its side, and then lift it up and put it in place. And then you had to kind of carve it to fit it into position. And I should say the crew, we had this 200 and some people, 220, about 220 plus people working on the boat. Many of them were women. And I gotta say, I mean, women were terrific craftspeople. And they were particularly good at dealing with round shapes and irregular shapes and so on. And I attribute that somewhat to like, if you know how to sew, you gotta like, oh my God, you're dealing with all these kind of amorphous things all the time. Men gotta have right angles, I mean, there were some really interesting dynamics to that. This woman was at the whole project the whole way. The bronze bolts holding those pieces together. When we realized how much those bronze bolts cost, sometimes like $15 to $20 a piece, and we needed 800 of them, some guy comes up and says, I can make those. So he and another guy got together, the machinist, retired machinist, and they made the bolts for us. We had a lot of that happening, and this is one of the great things about having a diverse crew, because these people came literally from all walks of life. From genuine farmers, that had to milk every day, to rocket scientists from Moog. And they all worked together, which was just amazing. I mean, it was just amazing that these people shared with one another. We'd have the person who wanted to work here because they just loved the smell of wood. People walk in, the nostrils would flare. They're like, I could work here, And then the other guy comes in, he's got the pickup truck, he got the sharp tools, he got the tool belt, he comes in, I'll use my tools, they're sharper, Anyway, you got those people working with each other, which was just amazing. And I gotta say, just as a footnote to this, it's amazing that you're thinking a project like this with this many people working on a project, particularly this many men, there wasn't any kind of trash talk or any of the kind of stuff like, yeah, man, you guys, I cut that seam longer, you guys, that it just didn't exist. And I still don't know why. It exists in almost every other thing, from people mowing lawns to whatever it is. It's just kind of like weird competition. But it wasn't in this. We haven't figured out there's a spiritual effect to this in some ways. But we actually ended up creating a community of people who worked on this. And then new people would come into the community and they would be kind of welcomed into this community. It was like some kind of weird church, but maybe, you know, these things happened on the Erie Canal, you know, the spiritualists, you know, the boat builders, you know. Anyway, but it was a marvelous group of people, and you can see as this thing developed, it was extremely complex. It took a long time. It took a lot of work, and everything that you had to move on this boat was heavy. It took more than one person to move it. You couldn't just say, "Grab that piece of wood for me. You three guys, can you bring that over here?" kind of thing, or can we hook up a gantry or something to carry it? But so we laid the boat out like this. The frame, I think there are 55 some frames in this. It was kind of remarkable. No one could kind of keep track of how much this was. But all that wood had to be cut. The bark had to be cut. It had to be shaped. They had to be. In some cases, it had to be dried. In some cases, you'll see it had to be steam bent. We had to bend things around. And somewhere along the line, we had a lot of visitors. And part of the whole issue was that why would you build this thing on the waterfront? Well, we wanted to get as many people touching this boat, being a part of this boat as possible. That was the whole idea of doing a public project. You want the public, you want everybody in the public to have access to it, and not just a handful of people who are crazy enough to devote all their time to it. So one of the first things that we did, and this is back when Kathy Hochul and the other politicians were there, we had them sign the keel with a magic marker, you know. Knowing full well it'll be underwater when, you know, like your career and everything. It'll be underwater eventually, but just the idea of signing it is like, well, this is what people do when they do graffiti, you know, like they take ownership. And that became, so we said, well, you ought to let everybody do that. So we did let everybody do that, to a point, for a while, until finally some guy came in with a magic marker and said, "Where's the graffiti boat?" I'm thinking, wait a minute. He's missing the point here, you know, the graffiti boat. Anyway, and we decided after that, well, we needed to paint over this stuff anyway. But the idea was that to get everybody to at least touch it, and we gave parts of the boats away to kids with the stamp of the boat on it and so forth. And some of them joined us later on the canal when we were doing our trips. They're like, I had this little piece of the boat. Anyway, so we decided finally we put a map up, and I don't know why we didn't do this right from the beginning, but all of a sudden we realized that we had also a team of docents, a wonderful team of docents who had kind of learned the whole spiel about the canal and why it was here and answering all the questions, and asking people like where they were from. So we put this up, and so this was about halfway through the project, and we looked at it, you ask yourself, like, what's this guy from Siberia? What's he? I mean, what's his story? You know, I mean, or you know, one that isn't on here is I met a couple from Tasmania. You know, and Tasmania, like, what brought you to Buffalo? And one of the best ones. This couple came in and they were really interested in the boat, asking all kinds of questions and so forth. And they had this kind of slightly peculiar accent. I say, it wasn't Australian. I think, I wonder what is one of those, and sure enough they were from New Zealand. And they had been in San Francisco and they heard about the canal boat being built and they came to Buffalo to see it. And I thought, all right. I said, well, this is good. He said, well, no, we're interested in this. We're into the kind of boat thing down there and so forth. And this really sounds, while we're in America, you know, we're in San Francisco, why not? You know, how far is that? You know, compared to, you know. Anyway, and they said, well, what about Niagara Falls? Yeah, well, we might catch that on the way back. I said, yes! This is what Buffalo's been fighting for years. Someone to come to Buffalo and then see Niagara Falls. They come to Buffalo and, oh, go to Niagara and then, oh, might stop in there. The hotels are cheap. Anyway, we had people literally from all over, and certainly a lot of Europeans, you can see Canadians and so on. But you look at these individual things and you said, there's a story with every one of those, So here's the boat under control. I said there weren't any 2x4s in the boat. Those 2x4s that you see on top there were actually just used to hold the frames in place. Those were not part of the boat. But that was a massive amount of wood. And notice these curved pieces like this along the sheer straight. Those are about 4x8 white oak pieces that were straight. And they have to be bent, okay? This was a major task, but this is old boat building technology. So We threw the boat, we had the timbers, the canal was right outside the door there, so we put a little leash on them and we soaked them for a week in the canal. Really scuzzy, I mean, they came up all slimy and wet, so they soaked for about a week, and then we steamed them. We built a box and then we steamed them for about 5 hours or so. And then you have kind of like one shot where you have a whole team of people that are going to bend them into the right shape. If you don't do it right in the right amount of time, you got to throw the thing away and start over again. And so here the guys proudly, after they had just steamed that piece, they had a template here that would give the shape of the shape of that needed to fit to. Laid it out on. We built this jig here, and then put jacks underneath it. Jack it up, stick a block in, jack it up higher, stick a block until you bent the thing up to fit this, and then go a little bit over the top. So you bend it a little more than need because it's going to relax a little bit, and then just hope it's right. Anyway, and then that has to be installed in the boat. And then we actually ended up, and this is where we had such clever, wonderful people. And this is a great argument for diversity. I know diversity sounds like supposed to be a bad word now. You can lose your funding if you use that word, diversity. But we had such a rich mixture of people, from literally, as I said, from space scientists to farmers, to carpenters, to seamstresses and fashion designers. I mean, all kinds of people working on this. And there was always somebody who could do something we needed without going outside. One of the things we needed were these special these are 19th century kind of clamps, so you can reach up and push something together with a long, deep throat like this. We needed dozens of those things. The guy said, no, I'll go make them. So he went home and he made them. He took the pattern from the 19th century one and made them. We also had a guy, we needed when you put the planks in, the planks need to be cupped out on the inside so they'll make the bend around so they're not sticking out. You had to cup them out so they fit onto the turn of the frames. And he went back, he made all the blades, and he made all the plans. We needed like 20 of them. He came back with 20, 25 of these things. We only had a couple of examples to start with. So these were the kinds of things that people were challenged by, and they were thrilled to do it. They were happy to do it. This is the planking. The planking of the boat is one of the most complex pieces of it, because unlike planking a house, like a clapboard house where all the pieces are parallel to one another, these are not parallel in any way. All the planks taper, they get narrower, okay, and they also curve, okay. So they have to do this, okay, and so you have to measure. You put in the first set of planks. That's a big piece of steam bed on top, and you have to fit the planks all to that line and to the bow. Everyone has to be individually cut and individually fitted to one another. And I won't get into complex, where the seams come together, one side's flat, the other one's at an angle, so you can put caulking in. These are traditional boat building techniques. Actually, when you finally get the hull done, when you get the hull completed, there's a moment in boat building called the whiskey plank, where once the hull is enclosed, it's actually boat now, you haven't finished any of the interior or whatever, you have a whiskey celebration. And we were able to get Buffalo Distillery to make a whiskey for us, which will be sold along the canal this summer, called the Whiskey Plank, Buffalo Distillery. Which is excellent. We had a big party with all the politicians were there, of course, and everybody, they passed this stuff out, and that was our celebration. But that was, you think you're like close to finish, and you're not at all close to finish. We had the deadline of having to get this finished because we were going to be pushed out of the building, because they wanted to do something else with the building that the state had bought. If it had been our building, we would have stayed longer. But anyway. So we were on a deadline. It's like these TV shows. Time is running out. The team has to come up with a solution. Well, we were going through that constantly. So this is, I'll just run you through this. This is how it's eventually coming together. All those scenes were done. We're doing the cabin. The cabin, everyone was thinking, well, that's going to be like, that's just like regular carpentry, just a cabin. But you'll notice that and this is partially my fault, the designing of this way. It's a compound curve. It curves fore and aft, and it curves sideways. So it's kind of domical. All right, so that means that none of those frames are the same. Okay, they're all different. So they had to be adjusted. Anyway, long story short, we finished the boat just in time, got it painted, ready to go. Then we had to get it out and launch it. For all the years that we've been working on the boat, the idea was we were going to launch it right there at the harbor. We were right next to the commercial slip, right next to the Erie Canal. And we'd looked into getting these giant cranes and renting the cranes and so forth. Yes, they could do it. They could lift the thing up. They could set it in the water. But we found out that the ground was too soft. Like that had been filled since the 19th century. And the crane would go right down into the ground if they tried to lift the boat up, a 40-ton boat. So we realized we had to put it on a trailer and we had to take it down to the Buffalo Harbor where they have a serious seawall. We used had to rent this. This cost a bit. This had 48 wheel trailer. Okay, and each one of those wheel sets was like a caster. It would turn. So the guy the pilot had this like. He could turn every wheel in that trailer, so it could go sideways again, Anyway, and it extended. It was like we extended up to 100 feet. It was, I think, when it's closed, it's like 60 feet, but it stretches out 100 feet. Anyway, we just turned all that over to them. They lifted the boat up. We had it on these supports here. They lifted the boat up and then drove the trailer underneath that. And that was how the birth took place. This is early in the morning, and then for the first time we saw the boat out so you could actually stand back and look at it. We'd spent like years right up against it, that looks pretty good to me, and now it's like, oh, just like the pictures, so this was a lot of hullabaloo. And then we took it down to the harbor, and here you can see that full length of that trailer. This was very nerve-wracking to see them do that because the engineers, the guys doing this, they were not the boat builders. They hadn't built the boat. It was just something to move for them, and we're like crossing our fingers, and we were really quite upset that they had put the supports for the boat too close to the middle. And this is a heavy boat. You didn't want to twist the boat or crack the boat, and we caulked all of these seams. All it takes is twisting it or whatever, and suddenly you've got a leaky boat. Anyway, long story short, this was the boat. We brought it back, and another big crowds here. We gave all of our speeches and so forth, and the boat was done. This was last May. So last summer, this is what our plan was. We did the inauguration in 2024. We gave all of our speeches. We got lots of publicity and so forth, kind of worldwide. Publicity. Then we did last summer, and this summer we've done sea trials where we've taken the boat, as far as Rochester. Some of you said you'd seen it in Rochester, back and forth, and learning how to negotiate the boat through the locks, particularly. And what we did, it has no engine on it. I mean, it's actually pure in that sense. It's actually an authentic. It's replica. So we didn't. If we had done it for handicap accessible, it'd be covered with aluminum and plastic and so forth, and toilets and so on. It's none of that. It's like the original boat. It's like a historic house museum artifact. So we pull it with a tugboat, which I'll show you in a minute. So we did sea trials with that, and we're still doing them now. We're still practicing, and we're trying to train the various crews how to do this, because we need these 100 and some people that had worked on the boat. Want to be on the boat at least for some period. So they're going to be joining, someone's going to get on in Syracuse and go to Schenectady, and someone to Schenectady to Albany or whatever. But you can imagine that's a logistic problem of its own, which we're working on. So the winter berth, we just set it in the mud up in Lockport, above the upper lock in Lockport. This is how they did it in the old days when the canal was drained during the winter. Drained of the water, and the boats would just sit down in the mud and they'd stay moist. A wooden boat needs to stay wet. Sort of counterintuitive to a lot of people who are used to dry feet and dry bilges and so on. But anyway, that was the thing to do. So we then refloated it, and this summer we've taken it out again. And so this September 21st, the World Canal Conference is coming here. This was another level of negotiation to get them to have that here in Buffalo. So people from all over the world are coming to here. They had it in Rochester some years back, I think. But these are the serious canal people, and so we're kind of the final act in that event. And on the 24th we leave Buffalo and come to first stop is at Lockport, and then we work our way up to Rochester and so forth, and go down to New York City, where we arrive on October 25th. October 26th there's a big celebration down there, and we have the word that the governor came to visit us last week, and the word is she will be there in New York to greet us. So that's going to add a little punch to what it is. It won't be just those geezers. It'll be, canal aficionados. Although she's amazing. She knows a lot about the canal. I mean, she's like one of the few politicians that she knows her stuff. I mean, she knows the stories. She knows she's been into it. And she and her husband travel on the canal quite a bit. Anyway, so this is some of our sea trials. We took it to the locks in Lockport, and this is actually where we bottomed out in the winter. When they drained the canal, we set the boat down, covered it up, wrapped it up like a Christmas present, and we expected to find homeless people living in there when it opened up in the spring, or bears, or some other hibernating critters. And this is the boat. This is the canal boat, the CL Churchill, which is the tugboat, which we're going to be using to pull it. We are going to try. We won't be doing it this summer. We thought we would, but we will. When we come back, we will be using horses. The boat was originally pulled by 4 horses, and it's set up for that. And there are long sections, as you know, long sections of the canal, 20 miles, 25 miles, where you can pull it with horses. The bike path was the old tow path, so it's still set up for that. So we will do that. So this is what the plan is. This is what the itinerary is. So the last site is Ossining. On Friday the 24th, we go into New York City that night before Saturday, and on Sunday is when they have the big ceremony down there, and then we will take the boat back up to Albany, and we'll winter it in Albany, because by that time the canal will be drained. So we will bring it back next year, early next spring. Right. So that's, and let me tell you, this is one of those things where you realize. It's so easy to come up with these ideas. I say this because a lot of this is largely my fault. I mean, these are what I say. Hey, we got a canal boat. We got a canal. I mean, why don't we do the wedding of the waters? Why not? I mean, it can't be that hard. Anyway, and then when you realize you're trying to get 220 people on and off this boat and getting the train back to Buffalo and taking the bus to Albany. Anyway. It's a big deal, but fortunately, and this is something else I learned of this, being a solitary kind of scholar most of my life. I mean, what a challenge it is to manage hundreds of people, and to find people to manage hundreds of people. So I sort of back off and get these people. Yeah, you work it out with these guys. See, you can work, and so that's why I like being emeritus, sort of hanging back and kind of commenting on it, talking to people about it, and so forth. But we have an incredible crew of people that have been working on this. So here's a wonderful shot of the boat going down the canal. You can see the tugboat on the side, but this really says a lot here about the canal. I mean, about the canal, and there's a wonderful image. A photographer, Coco, did this photograph. So I'm just very quickly about what we're trying to do with the canal, and we've been practicing this in the summer. This is an educational project, and it's still going on. I mean, what we did when we set out to do the canal, we wanted to kind of build this kind of community, make this a community project. We wanted to create an identity for Buffalo, and Buffalo is identified now as a canal city, as the canal boat, and part of my notion of kind of advertising or of publicity was to have something photographable. You go to Paris, well, you got the Eiffel Tower, you got a bunch of stuff. When you go to Buffalo, you got Niagara Falls. No, you've got a Buffalo canal boat on the Erie Canal, the real place. So this can become a serious symbol. And just as we said, that boat's been photographed thousands of times. I mean, it's just like it's become a piece of what Buffalo's image is, and so it did that job, and it brought the community together. We back in the early, I think it was 2003, the slave ship Amistad came to Buffalo, and it talked about. I think they came to Rochester. They probably stopped in Rochester on the way, and the whole city got behind this. They had the libraries. Everybody read the same book. There was an adult version. There was a kids version. There was a movie. The law schools got involved in doing a faux trial of the Amistad crew and so on. It was quite amazing, and that really impressed me. I mean, I bought dozens of books I bought on slavery and emancipation and so forth. I mean, it literally worked when you do a program like this and you build it around something that everybody can identify with, and that was building community. And this is exactly what this did. And this kind of sort of lighthearted suggestion that why don't we take it to New York was kind of an extension of that if we do this in Buffalo, why don't we do this the whole canal? And DeWitt Clinton had this phrase that he used when he was talking about the reason for the canal was that creating a bond of union by this transportation system. The people on the East Coast were going to be connected to the people on the West Coast, or on the in the center part of the state, and vice versa. I mean, if you have that connection, those families still stay together. You can see your aunt in Massachusetts. I mean, you can buy stuff from New York, or you can buy something from Buffalo. I mean, this was there's a binding of the country. And one of the things that people were very worried about, and we forget about this, but in 1825, they were very worried that the people who were moving into the West, that were settling in the West, were going to be cut off and pretty soon begin to not think of themselves as Americans. They were starting to trade with Canada, with Britain. They were starting to trade with the French. They were, and there were people like Aaron Burr who actually tried to start their own kingdoms, their own countries. And so people were afraid that the United States, with this vast amount of land that they were claiming, was going to break up in a bunch of little principalities. So it was important for a lot of the leadership, particularly DeWitt Clinton and others, to make connections here to keep that west part of the culture of the East Coast. Anyway, so we have. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about. These are some of the things we're going to be dealing with on the boat. We're going to be doing we've already done programs for various schools, connecting them with the Erie Canal. We have some wonderful education people working in our, again, part of our faculty, so to speak, that are doing these kinds of things, aligning it with the local curriculum and so on. So that as this boat goes through and as it comes back in 2026, these are going to be the kinds of things that are going to be reinforced. This is a little bit about the exhibits that are going to be inside. We're still working on the exhibits. Again, time is running out. You know, the team has to have everything by the 24th. I mean, we're still dealing with that. But this is all happening. We've got DeWitt Clinton's cabin. We've done all of this paneling. They're just starting to do the paneling. We made everything. I mean, everything is custom made on this. There's no, as I said, there's nothing from the hardware store. We even make our own hardware. We've cast bronze, and we've also have a blacksmith who's done all the hinges and so forth. We're setting up all of those things in the most authentic possible way. So this is, I can't remember, Brockport or somewhere, where we do these canoe shaping. So we're talking about wood and boat building, and a big piece of what we're doing is dealing with the issues of the history and the connection with all of this. This is Jonathan Thornton. He's doing forging some hooks there. Lafayette was on this boat the summer before. Lafayette came through here, I believe. Yeah, didn't you remember? Did he give a talk? Yeah. Okay, good. Here? I mean. Oh yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, he was there with his straw hat and so forth. Anyway, so but he went on the boat on the Seneca Chief. He went from Buffalo to Lockport, and then took to Tonawanda, and then took a carriage. He had to see Niagara Falls, and then he went over, and they hadn't finished the Lockport lock, and so he went down below and got a boat from there to Rochester. But he was a little bit ahead of his time. He had to get to Bunker Hill, I guess, for the 4th of July. Anyway, that's the kind of thing. We're also, one of the things on the canoe, we know what the Seneca chief was carrying, and one of the things that was carrying was a birch bark canoe. So Eddie Niblo, the guy here is our museum curator. He was supposed to be talking tonight, but too busy. Anyway, he's making this birch bark canoe, authentic birch bark canoe, which will be carried on the boat. There'll be a point of discussion, but this is where the boat is now in the commercial slip. A little name dropping here. So Kathy Hobo came to visit us the other. This is I'm sure you know this guy. Brian Stratton, he's the head of the Canal Corporation, but he's spent thousands of miles going over the state, visiting every project that's going on. Now, I just want to end here. I know this sounds a lot like a medicine show or whatever, but we did do 2 volumes of the book of the Erie Canal Perspectives at 200, which I have copies of here, which you're welcome to buy. Special prices, $20. Sales, you cannot buy them in stores, Anyway, but it should be $19.95, but it couldn't have. So $20, they're usually $25, but since you're here, you get a special break. But I wrote a number of articles. I did a lot of the illustrations in both volumes, the covers and so on. But there were a group of us that are part of the Maritime Center and local scholars and so forth that have done the articles in this. But we look into a lot of the issues that trying to tell the truth about the Erie Canal, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we're talking about, the derelict communities in Buffalo and various other cities, because the drunks and the prostitution, all that kind of business. We're talking about the problems with the Haudenosaunee, taking the Haudenosaunee's land in the 18th century and the 19th century. In fact, we actually this is where it was quite gratifying, is that as we got into this project, we were challenged early on by some. You can't call this a Seneca chief because the Senecas don't have chiefs. It's a matrilineal thing, and so we'd stepped in it, and it's like, well, this is what it was called. So, well, why was it called that? Why was it called Seneca? So we had to work through all of this, and we literally had for 4+ years, we had semi-regular seminars with scholars from the Haudenosaunee, from the Iroquois Museum and so forth, with our anthropologists, their anthropologists, having these discussions about how do we deal with this? How do we deal with the dark side of the Erie Canal? And we actually, the value of talking with one another is really quite remarkable. We worked this out, and we actually did a show when we were building the boat. We did a show on the Haudenosaunee, how the Erie Canal affected them, what they thought of it. So if the Euro-Americans think the greatest thing we ever did, yeah, man conquered the nation and so forth. And we've got the other side as well, the sacred spaces of water and land and the spirit and so forth being violated by this digging this trench right through the middle of it, knocking down all the trees and so forth. And they're still irritated about that. And why wouldn't they be? Anyway, so one of the things that we decided is, what can we do about this, and how can we this is a fact, the Erie Canal is here, what do we do with it? And these subjects would not have been raised if the boat hadn't been called the Seneca Chief and we hadn't been doing this project. So let's get together and figure out how to make lemonade out of these issues, these difficult issues. And I think we've done that. One of the things that we asked them, well, what could we do? There's a lot of what we're doing obviously is symbolic. And when they opened the canal, they call this the wedding of the waters, right? So instead of the wedding of the waters, well, instead of, first of all, celebrating it, we're saying you can celebrate, we need to commemorate it. It's like a war. It's like you don't celebrate a war, you commemorate. You need to remember it. You need to bring the subject up again, and you need to re-examine it and where your values are today. Like you can talk about the Old South and about slavery and so forth, raise the subject. Well, what do you think about it now? They didn't think it was bad. What do you think about it now? How do you re-examine these things? You can't bury them. You can't celebrate them. You can commemorate them. So our attitude from the very beginning was that this is a project of commemoration. We're going to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly tell the truth about what happened in all these situations. And their story is quite poignant, and we tell that story at the same time we talk about the triumphs in modern engineering and the kind of the things that Western Europeans valued so much. Tell both of those stories. They're both stories. They're both real, genuine stories. So they bought into that, and so one of the things that we're doing, and it's described in the second volume of the book, we said, well, how can we deal with this symbolically? So they said, why don't you plant trees when you go down the canal? And we're doing that. What kind? White pines. Well, white pine was the sacred tree for the Haudenosaunee. So at every stop, these 29 stops or whatever, we're planting a tree. We're also calling, instead of the wetting of the waters, the gathering of the waters. So we are collecting water from all of these places which will water the final tree, which will be in New York City. I don't know where it's going to be in New York, maybe in Central Park or whatever. So, I mean, that's symbolism, but the whole thing is symbolism. And our ideas, our memories of history and so forth are guided by that. Anyway, I know I've kind of gone on, but it's a long canal.
Normally, I like to have time for questions, but the library does like us to start clearing out at 8:30, so they can clean the table, clear the chairs, so they're closing at 9, so they're ready tomorrow morning for another event. Maybe you can come up and talk to them. If anybody can give Doug over here a ride, did he leave already?
Right there.
Well, you got an Uber driver here, so maybe he could help you.
Yeah, it's already in the plan.
Anyway, September, we're going to be at the Greece School District Transportation Building, and then we'll be back here in November for a talk on the history of Durand Eastman Park. And in November program is the story, the unfortunate story of the Morgan Manning house that had the fire in January in their project. In January, we don't have a program. In January, we're going to have Don Riley is writing a book on the contemporary history of the town of Greece. So the 20th century history of the 20th, not as old stuff, the old timers. So thank you very much. If you need to talk, but they do like to start cleaning the table, the room at 8:30. So
if anyone wants a book and has exact change, that's fine. Well, otherwise, you can go online. You can order it from the Buffalo Maritime Center.
Link is available. Link is on our. Want to learn more from the Greece Historical Society and Museum? Then click that subscribe button. Hit that bell icon to get notified when there's new content coming from the Greece Historical Society. You can visit us on the web at greecehistoricalsociety.org. You can find us on Facebook at Greece Historical Society. And you can stop in at the Greece Historical Society at 595 Long Pond Road. This has been a Greece Historical Society Productions.